This was the third unexplainable disaster to strike their homestead in as many months, and she knew without turning what expressions would be on her relatives' faces fear mingled with suspicion, all of it directed at her. "It follows you, Fiona," her Uncle Jeremiah said, his voice barely audible over the rain. "Wherever you go, misfortune trails behind like a shadow." Fiona clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders, her knuckles white with tension. Montana Territory, 1876, was no place for a woman with a reputation for bringing bad luck. Yet here she stood, 22 years old, unmarried and increasingly unwelcome in the only home she'd ever known. "The livestock got out safely," she said, refusing to acknowledge his accusation. "We can rebuild," her Aunt Beatrice made the sign of the cross. "3 barns in 3 years, Fiona. The drought last summer, your cousin Henry's broken leg, your father's death." She shook her head, rainwater streaming down her weathered face. "It ain't natural." Fiona bit her tongue until she tasted blood. Her father had died of pneumonia after falling through river ice, a common enough tragedy in these parts. Henry had broken his leg trying to ride a half-wild Mustang after too much whiskey. The drought had affected half the territory. But logic held no power against superstition, especially when people needed someone to blame. "I'll start clearing the debris at first light," Fiona said, turning away from the accusation in their eyes. "That won't be necessary," Uncle Jeremiah said, his tone final. "Beatrice and I have been talking. It's time you moved on, girl." The words struck Fiona like physical blows. "This is my home." "Not anymore." Her uncle's face was set like stone. "There's a stagecoach heading to Whiteridge tomorrow. You'll be on it. You can't just cast me out." Fiona's voice rose with desperation. "Where will I go? What will I do?" "You're Alexander Blackwood's daughter," Aunt Beatrice said, a rare softness entering her voice. "Your father left you enough to make a start somewhere else, somewhere you can't bring any more misfortune to this family." Fiona's throat closed with grief and rage. "I have never brought misfortune to anyone." "Tell that to your mother," Uncle Jeremiah muttered, just loud enough for her to hear. The old accusation that Fiona's birth had somehow caused her mother's death pierced deeper than any knife. She turned away, refusing to let them see her tears. "I'll be gone by morning," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. The stagecoach rattled and bounced along the rutted trail to Whiteridge, each jolt driving home the reality of Fiona's situation. Cast out by her own family, labeled a curse, she now headed to a town where she knew no one, carrying only a small trunk of possessions and the money her father had left her. The elderly woman seated across from her smiled kindly. "First time to Whiteridge, dear." Fiona nodded, attempting a smile in return. "Yes, madam, it's a good town, growing fast since the silver strike 2 years back, a decent place for a fresh start." The woman studied Fiona's face, "And it looks to me like that's what you're after." "Is it that obvious?" Fiona asked. "Only to someone who's made a few fresh starts herself." The woman extended a gloved hand. "Margaret Holloway, I run the boarding house in Whiteridge. Fiona Blackwood." She accepted the handshake, grateful for the simple human contact after days of being treated like something contagious. "Traveling alone, Miss Blackwood?" "Yes." Fiona hesitated, then decided honesty might serve her better than secrecy in a new place. "My family and I parted ways." Margaret nodded without pressing for details. "Well, if you need a place to stay while you get your bearings, my establishment is clean, respectable, and reasonably priced." For the first time in days, Fiona felt a flicker of hope. "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. I'd appreciate that very much." The stagecoach lurched suddenly, throwing Fiona against the side panel. Outside, the driver shouted and the horses whinnied in alarm. "Whoa there," the driver's voice carried through the wooden walls. "Easy, boys." The coach slowed, then stopped completely. Margaret frowned. "We're not due for a change of horses for another hour." The door swung open, revealing the weathered face of the driver. "Sorry, folks, looks like we got a broken axle. Going to have to stop here while my boy rides ahead for help." A chorus of complaints rose from the other passengers. Fiona remained silent, her heart sinking. Of course something would go wrong. It always did around her, or so everyone believed. "How long will repairs take?" Margaret asked practically. "Could be a few hours, could be till morning," the driver admitted. Lucky for you all, we're just a mile or so from the Cottonwood Creek trading post. Not much to look at, but they've got food and a roof if we need to wait out the night." The passengers gathered their essential belongings and began the walk to the trading post, grumbling all the way. Fiona hung back, irrationally worried that her presence might somehow make things worse. Margaret slowed her pace to walk alongside her. "Not the welcome to the territory you were hoping for, I imagine." "Nothing ever goes quite as planned around me," Fiona said, trying to make light of it. The trading post appeared around a bend in the road, a long, low building of rough-hewn logs with a wooden porch spanning its front. A few horses stood hitched to a rail, and smoke curled from the stone chimney. As they approached, a man emerged from the building, shading his eyes against the afternoon sun. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a rangy build that spoke of hard work rather than easy living. His face was tanned and weathered beneath the brim of a battered hat, but he couldn't have been much past 30. When he spotted the bedraggled group approaching, he straightened and came to meet them. "Stagecoach trouble?" he asked, his voice deep and pleasant. "Broken axle," the driver confirmed. "My boy's gone for help, but we might need to impose on your hospitality for a spell, Mr. West." "Wade West," the man said with a nod to the passengers. "And it's no imposition. Come on in out of the sun." His eyes swept the group and paused briefly on Fiona. She felt a curious warmth rise to her cheeks under his gaze, which held nothing but polite interest. No suspicion, no judgment, just the look of one stranger assessing another. Inside, the trading post was larger than it had appeared from outside. One half served as a general store, with shelves stocked with essentials from ammunition to coffee to fabric. The other half functioned as a rustic tavern, with a bar along one wall and several tables scattered about. "Coffee's hot," Wade said, gesturing to a large pot on the stove. "Got stew simmering too, if anyone's hungry. Not fancy, but it'll fill you up." The passengers settled gratefully at the tables. Fiona stood uncertainly near the door, feeling out of place until Margaret beckoned her over. "Come sit, dear. No sense standing there like a lost soul." Wade brought over 2 mugs of coffee. "Ladies," he said, setting them down, "sugar's on the table if you want it." "Thank you, Mr. West," Fiona said softly. He paused, studying her more carefully than before. "Haven't seen you pass through here before." "I'm on my way to Whiteridge," she explained. "To start anew." Something in her tone must have revealed more than she intended, because understanding flickered in his eyes. "Well, Miss Blackwood, Fiona Blackwood. Miss Blackwood, Whiteridge is a town that appreciates newcomers, especially those willing to work hard and mind their own business. That describes me perfectly, Mr. West." Fiona managed a small smile. He returned it, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "Then you should do just fine." He moved away to serve the other passengers, and Fiona found herself watching him. There was something reassuring about his steady movements and calm demeanor. He seemed like a man who knew exactly who he was and what his place in the world might be, something Fiona had never felt for herself. "He's not married," Margaret said quietly, a knowing look in her eye. Fiona's cheeks flamed. "I wasn't, of course not," Margaret said with a smile, "just making conversation. Wade West is well respected around these parts, came out west after the war, built this place up from nothing. Keeps to himself mostly, but fair in his dealings. They say he was a cavalry officer, though he never talks about it." Fiona sipped her coffee, trying not to appear too interested. "Does he run this place alone? Has a partner, a patchy fellow named Joaquin. Unusual arrangement, but they make it work. Joaquin handles the trapping and trading with the native folks. Wade manages the rest." As if summoned by the mention of his name, the door opened and a Native American man entered, carrying several rabbit carcasses strung on a line. He nodded to Wade, who gestured toward the back room. The newcomer passed through the main room with barely a glance at the passengers. "That's Joaquin," Margaret whispered. "Man of few words, but the best tracker in 3 territories." The afternoon wore on with no sign of the driver's assistant returning with help. As dusk approached, Wade lit the oil lamps and announced that anyone who needed to stay the night could bed down in the trading post. "Got a small room in back for the ladies," he said, nodding to Fiona and Margaret. "It's where Joaquin usually sleeps, but he's offered to bunk with me tonight." That's very kind, Margaret said, but I wouldn't want to displace anyone. No displacement, Wade assured her. He sleeps under the stars more often than not anyway. As the evening progressed, Fiona found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. The other passengers shared stories and a few bottles of whiskey, creating an atmosphere of camaraderie that temporarily overshadowed their travel misfortune. Wade joined them occasionally, refilling drinks or adding a quiet comment to the conversation. Fiona was aware of his gaze returning to her throughout the evening, never lingering long enough to be improper, but noticeable nonetheless. She told herself not to read anything into it. A single woman traveling alone was bound to attract attention, not all of it welcome. Later, as she helped Margaret make up the beds in the small back room, the older woman chuckled. "What?" Fiona asked. "Wade West hasn't taken his eyes off you all evening." Fiona busied herself with smoothing a blanket. "He's probably just making sure none of his whiskey goes missing." Margaret laughed outright. "Oh, child, for a woman striking out on her own, you're remarkably unaware of the effect you have." "The only effect I've ever had is to drive people away," Fiona said before she could stop herself. Margaret's expression softened. "I think you'll find that's not universally true." Before Fiona could respond, a commotion arose from the main room. They hurried out to find several men had entered, trailed dusty and hard-eyed. Not the stage driver's assistant with help, but strangers who brought with them an immediate tension. Wade stood behind the bar, his posture relaxed but his eyes watchful. Joaquin had materialized from somewhere and now stood near the back wall, arms crossed. "Evening, gentlemen," Wade said evenly. "What can I do for you?" The leader of the newcomers, a burly man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, surveyed the room before answering. "Whiskey." "Food if you've got it, information definitely. 2 out of 3 I can provide right now," Wade said, reaching for glasses. "Information depends on what you're after." The man slapped coins on the counter. "Tracking a man named Morris, red hair, missing 2 fingers on his left hand. Passed through here in the last week or so." Wade poured the whiskey, his expression giving nothing away. "Can't say that I have. Lot of travelers come through though, don't always catch names." The scarred man's eyes narrowed. "He stole something that belongs to my employer, something valuable." "Sorry to hear it," Wade said, "but can't help you with what I haven't seen." The tension in the room ratcheted higher. Fiona instinctively stepped back, bumping into a chair. The sound drew the scarred man's attention to her. "Well now," he said, his gaze traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "What have we here? Don't often see quality like this in a backwater trading post." Wade's voice hardened. "The lady's not part of the establishment. She's a passenger from the stagecoach broke down a mile back." The man raised his hands in mock surrender, just being friendly. He turned back to his whiskey, but his eyes kept drifting to Fiona. Margaret took Fiona's arm. "I think we should retire for the evening," she murmured. As they turned to leave, the scarred man spoke again. "Hold up there, Red." "Didn't catch your name." Fiona froze, uncertain whether to answer. Wade made the decision for her. "The ladies are tired from their journey," he said firmly. "Your whiskey's getting warm." Something dangerous flashed in the man's eyes, but he turned back to the bar. "Sure thing, boss. Just being sociable." Wade caught Fiona's eye and gave her a slight nod toward the back room. She understood the message and allowed Margaret to lead her away, feeling the scarred man's gaze burning into her back all the way. In the small room, Margaret locked the door behind them. "I don't like the look of those men," she said quietly. "Nor do I," Fiona agreed, her heart still racing. "Do you think they'll cause trouble?" "Not with Wade and Joaquin here," Margaret said with more confidence than Fiona felt. "Those two can handle themselves." Fiona lay awake long after Margaret's breathing had settled into the rhythm of sleep. Through the thin walls, she could hear the murmur of voices from the main room, occasionally punctuated by laughter that contained no real humor. Eventually, the voices faded, and she assumed the unwelcome visitors had either left or bedded down for the night. Just as she was finally drifting off, a sound at the window snapped her back to alertness. A shadow moved against the glass, and Fiona's breath caught in her throat. Before she could wake Margaret, there was a soft tap on the pane. "Miss Blackwood," came Wade's whispered voice. "Are you awake?" Heart pounding, Fiona slipped from her bed and approached the window. Wade's face appeared in the moonlight, his expression grave. "I need you to listen carefully," he said when she'd opened the window a crack. "Those men are dangerous. The one they're looking for, Morris, he was here 3 days ago, left something in my safe keeping." "Why are you telling me this?" Fiona whispered. "Because I need to get you and Mrs. Holloway out of here before dawn. They're planning to search the place tomorrow, and I don't want either of you caught in the middle if things go badly." A chill ran through Fiona that had nothing to do with the night air. What about the other passengers? Already spoke to them. Most are continuing on foot to Whiteridge at first light. Driver thinks the replacement axle won't arrive till midday. He glanced over his shoulder. "I've asked Joaquin to guide you and Mrs. Holloway by a different route. He knows these hills better than anyone." "But why separate us from the others?" Wade's expression was hard to read in the darkness. "The man there after Morris, he described someone to me, someone he said was following him, a woman with red hair who brings bad luck wherever she goes." Fiona's blood turned to ice. That's not me." "I know that," Wade said quietly. "But that fellow with the scar, he was asking too many questions about you after you left. Said something about a woman cursed with misfortune who travels ahead of disaster." The familiar accusation, even from strangers, made Fiona's chest tighten painfully. "My family believes I'm cursed," she admitted, the words spilling out despite herself. "That's why I'm leaving. They think I bring bad luck." Instead of the revulsion or fear she expected, Wade's expression softened. "Do you believe that?" "No," Fiona said firmly. "Bad things happen, they just seem to happen more around me. Like a stagecoach breaking down, despite everything, Fiona found herself smiling faintly. "Like that, yes." Wade returned the smile, then grew serious again. "Wake Mrs. Holloway. Pack only what you can carry easily. Joaquin will meet you at the back door in 20 minutes. What about you?" "I'll keep our friends occupied." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Be careful, Miss Blackwood. I hope to see you in Whiteridge soon." Before she could respond, he disappeared from the window. Fiona stood motionless for several heartbeats, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Either Wade West was the most trusting man she'd ever met, or he was sending her away for reasons he hadn't fully explained. She woke Margaret and relayed Wade's instructions in hushed tones. "Oh my," the older woman said, instantly alert. "This is most irregular. Should we trust him?" Fiona asked, already knowing her own answer. Margaret considered for only a moment. "Yes, Wade West is not a man who would send women into danger without good reason. If he says we should go with Joaquin, then that's what we should do." They packed quickly and silently, taking only what they could carry in small bags. At the appointed time, they eased open the back door to find Joaquin waiting with 3 horses. "We ride now," he said simply. "Follow." "Stay quiet." He helped them mount, then led them away from the trading post, following a narrow trail that wound into the hills. Fiona glanced back once to see the lamplight from the post growing smaller in the distance. Somewhere inside, Wade West was protecting them from a danger she didn't fully understand, all because of a curse she didn't believe in but couldn't seem to escape. The irony was not lost on her. They rode through the remainder of the night, following game trails and shallow streambeds that would leave minimal tracks. Joaquin set a pace that was steady but not punishing, occasionally stopping to listen to the night sounds or check their surroundings. As dawn broke, they paused in a small clearing to rest the horses. Margaret dismounted with a groan, rubbing her lower back. "Not as young as I used to be for night riding," she commented. Joaquin handed them each a strip of dried meat and a small water skin. "Eat, drink, we continue soon." Fiona chewed the tough jerky, watching their guide. His face revealed nothing of his thoughts, but she sensed no hostility from him, only a quiet competence that she found reassuring. "Thank you for helping us," she said when she'd finished eating. Joaquin nodded once. "Wade is my friend. He says go, I go." "Do you know why those men were asking about me?" Fiona ventured. For the first time, Joaquin looked directly at her. "Man, they seek Morris. He stole something old, Apache medicine, very powerful." He made a gesture with his hand that Fiona didn't recognize. "He say woman with fire hair follows him, brings death." Fiona's stomach twisted. "I've never met anyone named Morris. I've never followed anyone." I know this, Joquin said with unexpected gentleness. But men who seek him, they belief is dangerous. How much farther to Whiteridge? Margaret asked. 2 days normal, we take longer way, 3 days maybe. Margaret sighed but nodded resolutely. Well, at least we'll arrive with a story to tell. They continued their journey, keeping to less traveled paths and avoiding the main road. By midday, they had climbed high enough to look back over the valley. Fiona gasped at what she saw: a plume of dark smoke rising from the direction of the trading post. Wade, she whispered, her heart clenching with sudden fear. Joquin followed her gaze and frowned. Fire, he said, bad. We have to go back, Fiona insisted, already turning her horse. He could be hurt. Joquin moved his mount to block her path. No, Wade say take you to Whiteridge, safe. But the trading post, Wade knows fire, Joquin said cryptically. We go, now. The certainty in his voice gave Fiona pause. What do you mean he knows fire? War, Joquin said, tapping his chest where a heart would be. Fire inside, fire outside. He shook his head. Hard to explain. Wade is smoke walker. A what? One who walks through fire and lives many times. He gestured for them to continue riding. He find us if he needs. Reluctantly, Fiona followed, but her thoughts remained with the man who had risked himself to protect her from a danger she still didn't fully comprehend. The smoke rising behind them seemed like a physical manifestation of the curse that supposedly followed her destruction in her wake, even when she tried to escape it. For 3 days, they traveled, avoiding settlements and keeping to wilderness paths that Joquin navigated with unerring confidence. They spent nights under the stars, eating the provisions he had packed and listening to the sounds of the wilderness around them. Margaret proved surprisingly resilient for her age, though Fiona could see the journey was taking its toll. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Joquin reined in his horse atop a ridge. Below them, nestled in a broad valley, lay Whiteridge, larger than Fiona had expected, with several streets of buildings, a church spire, and the telltale industrial structures of the silver mines that had given the town its purpose. Whiteridge, Joquin announced unnecessarily. I take you to edge of town, then go back. Back to the trading post, Fiona asked, unable to keep the concern from her voice. Joquin nodded. Find Wade. When you do, Fiona said, impulsively reaching into her bag, please give him this. She withdrew a small wooden carving of a bird that her father had made for her years ago, one of the few keepsakes she had brought from home. Tell him thank you, and that I hope he's safe. Joquin accepted the carving, studying it briefly before tucking it into his shirt. I tell him. They descended into the valley as the afternoon light turned golden, reaching the outskirts of Whiteridge just as the town's lamps were being lit. Joquin escorted them to the edge of the main street. Mrs. Holloway's boarding house 3 streets that way, he said, pointing. Yellow house, big porch. You've been to Whiteridge before, Margaret said with a smile, many times. Good trading. Thank you for everything, Fiona said sincerely. Joquin nodded, his expression solemn. Be careful, fire hair, men who seek Morris, they may come here too. With that warning, he turned his horse and melted into the gathering darkness, leaving Fiona and Margaret to make their way into town alone. The boarding house was exactly as Joquin had described it, a large yellow clapboard structure with a generous front porch adorned with rocking chairs. Despite the unusual circumstances of their arrival, Margaret slipped effortlessly back into the role of proprietor, introducing Fiona to the housekeeper who had been managing things in her absence and showing her to a comfortable room on the 2nd floor. Rest tonight, Margaret said kindly. Tomorrow we'll get you settled properly. Alone in her room, Fiona finally allowed herself to process the whirlwind of events that had brought her here. In less than a week, she had been cast out by her family, survived a stagecoach breakdown, fled from mysterious men, and been guided through the wilderness by an Apache tracker, all because of a curse she didn't believe in but couldn't seem to shake. And somewhere back at that trading post, a man named Wade West had put himself in danger to protect her. The smoke she had seen still haunted her thoughts. Had the trading post burned? Was Wade safe? Would she ever know? Sleep eluded her for hours as her mind circled these questions without finding answers. The next morning, Fiona rose early and made her way downstairs to find Margaret already presiding over breakfast for her boarders. The older woman waved her over to an empty seat at the large dining table. "Everyone," Margaret announced, "this is Miss Fiona Blackwood, our newest resident. She's come to make a fresh start in Whiteridge." The other boarders, two elderly sisters, a middle-aged schoolteacher, and a young clerk from the assayer's office, welcomed her warmly. Fiona smiled and answered their questions about her journey, carefully editing out the more alarming details. After breakfast, Margaret took her aside. "I've been thinking about your situation, dear. You mentioned needing to find work." "Yes," Fiona confirmed. "I have some savings, but they won't last forever. As it happens, I could use help running this place. My arthritis makes it harder each year to manage all the cleaning and cooking." Margaret smiled. "Room and board plus a small wage to start. What do you say?" Fiona blinked back unexpected tears. "I'd be most grateful, Mrs. Holloway." "Margaret, please. We've fled danger together. I think that puts us on a first-name basis." And so Fiona's new life in Whiteridge began. The work at the boarding house was demanding but satisfying. She quickly learned the routines of cleaning rooms, preparing meals, and managing the modest household accounts. The regular boarders treated her with kindness, and the occasional travelers brought news and stories from distant places. But even as she settled into this new existence, Fiona couldn't stop watching the road from the trading post, hoping for news. Each day that passed without word of Wade or the events at Cottonwood Creek deepened her worry. She found herself thinking of him at odd moments, his calm confidence, the dimple that appeared when he smiled, the way he had unhesitatingly put himself between her and danger. A month passed, then two. Summer heat gave way to the first crispness of autumn. Fiona established herself as an indispensable part of the boarding house, earning the respect of the townspeople, and even making a few friends among the local women. She heard nothing about Wade West, until the day the stagecoach arrived carrying 3 passengers who changed everything. Fiona was beating rugs on the back porch when she heard Margaret call her name with unusual urgency. She hurried inside to find her employer looking flustered. "What is it? What's wrong?" "We have new guests," Margaret said, her voice low. 3 men who just arrived on the afternoon stage. "One of them?" She hesitated. "One has a scar through his eyebrow." Fiona's blood ran cold. "The men from the trading post," Margaret nodded. "I recognized him immediately. He's asking about a red-haired woman new to town." "Did you tell him about me?" Fiona whispered. "Certainly not." "Said I hadn't noticed anyone matching that description." Margaret squeezed Fiona's hand. "But Whiteridge isn't so large that you can hide for long. Someone will mention you eventually." "What should I do?" Margaret thought for a moment. "Go upstairs and pack a bag, just essentials. I'll have Jimmy from the livery bring a horse around back. You can stay with my sister in Henderson until we figure out what these men want." "I can't just run again," Fiona protested, though fear made her voice waver. "You can and you will," Margaret said firmly. "I promised Wade I'd keep you safe, and I intend to honor that promise." Fiona stared at her. "You've heard from Wade. When? Is he all right?" A flicker of guilt crossed Margaret's face. "A letter came last week. He's alive, though the trading post was indeed burned. He and Joaquin have been tracking the men who did it, the same ones who are here now." "Why didn't you tell me?" Fiona demanded. "Because he asked me not to," Margaret admitted. "He was afraid you'd feel responsible somehow, said you already carried too much undeserved guilt." Before Fiona could respond, the front door chimes sounded. Margaret's eyes widened in alarm. "Go now," she whispered. "Up the back stairs, I'll deal with them." Heart pounding, Fiona retreated to the kitchen and was about to ascend the servants' staircase when she heard a familiar voice from the front parlor. "Afternoon, Mrs. Holloway. Been a while. Wade." It was unmistakably Wade's voice, though it sounded rougher than she remembered. Throwing caution aside, Fiona moved closer to the parlor doorway, staying just out of sight but where she could hear the conversation. "Mr. West," Margaret said, obvious relief in her voice. "What a surprise." "Not a social call, I'm afraid," Wade said. "Heard you've got some new guests." 3 men arrived on today's stage. "That's right," Margaret confirmed cautiously. "They've taken rooms for the week." "I need to speak with them," Wade said. "Urgent business." They've gone to the Silver Dollar for refreshments, Margaret told him, said they'd return for dinner. There was a pause, then Wade lowered his voice. Is she safe? Is she here? Yes to both, Margaret answered just as quietly, though I was about to send her to my sister's. Those men have been asking about a red-haired woman new to town. No time for that now, Wade said grimly. They'll have someone watching the roads. Is there somewhere in the house she can hide while I deal with them? Unable to contain herself any longer, Fiona stepped into the doorway. I'm not hiding anywhere. Wade turned, and Fiona's breath caught at the sight of him. He looked leaner than before, his face more weathered, with a healing cut along one cheekbone. His clothes were travel-stained, and he carried himself with the wariness of a man who had been too long on alert. But when he saw her, something in his expression shifted, a softening around the eyes, a relieved exhale. Miss Blackwood, he said, his voice gentler than before, you're looking well. You're not, she replied honestly. A ghost of his dimpled smile appeared. Been a rough couple of months. The trading post can be rebuilt, he finished. Already started, in fact. Joaquin's overseeing the work while I handle this matter. Fiona moved fully into the room. And what matter is that exactly? Why are these men following me? What do they want? Wade exchanged a glance with Margaret, who nodded and quietly left the room, closing the door behind her. It's complicated, he began, removing his hat and running a hand through hair that had grown longer since she'd seen him last. The man they're hunting, Morris, he stole something from their employer, a relic of some kind, supposedly with mystical properties. Joaquin mentioned Apache medicine. Wade nodded. That's part of it. The relic was taken from an Apache burial site years ago by a collector named Thorne. Morris worked for Thorne as a guide, then stole the relic and ran. What does any of this have to do with me? Fiona asked, though a sinking feeling told her she already knew. Morris is superstitious. When things started going wrong during his escape, which they naturally would for a man on the run, he convinced himself he was being followed by a curse. Specifically, a woman with red hair who brings misfortune. Wade's eyes held her steadily. Sound familiar? Fiona sank into a chair. My family believed the same thing, that I brought bad luck wherever I went. I know, Wade said quietly. Morris spread that story while he was running. Somehow it reached these men, and now they believe finding you will lead them to Morris and the relic. But I've never met this Morris. Fiona protested, I have nothing to do with any of this. I know that too, Wade assured her, but they won't believe it without proof. What kind of proof? The kind I have right here. Wade reached into his coat and withdrew a small leather pouch. Morris is dead. Broke his neck in a fall 2 weeks ago, about 40 miles north of here. Joaquin and I found his body in this. He tipped the contents of the pouch into his palm. A small stone figure tumbled out, crudely carved but unmistakably representing a woman with flowing hair. This is what all the trouble is about? Fiona asked incredulously. According to Joaquin, it's an ancient spirit charm. The Apache believe it can bind a person's luck, good or bad. Wade's mouth twisted in a wry smile. Morris thought it would protect him from the curse he imagined was following him. Instead, he fell from a cliff in the dark. And these men want it for their employer? Wade nodded. Thorne is a collector of the unusual and supposedly supernatural. Pays well for such items, no questions asked about how they're acquired. So you're going to give it to them, Fiona concluded, and then they'll leave. That's the plan. Wade returned the figure to the pouch. But first, I need to make sure they understand that you have nothing to do with any of this, that the curse was just Morris's imagination. Fiona stared at the pouch, a lifetime of accusations echoing in her mind. What if it wasn't? What if I am somehow unlucky? Wade's expression softened. Fiona, he said, using her given name for the first time. Bad things happen to everyone. Some people just notice patterns more than others. My father died, she said, her voice barely audible. Our livestock sickened, crops failed, 3 barns burned in 3 years. And since you've been in Whiteridge, Fiona blinked, considering, nothing unusual, nothing bad at all, really. Because there's no curse, Wade said gently, just life with all its ups and downs. A knock at the door interrupted them. Margaret entered, her expression worried. They're coming back, she said. All 3 of them, they look Determined, Wade straightened, his face hardening back into the vigilant mask he'd worn when he arrived. Fiona, I need you to trust me. Whatever happens next, whatever is said, remember that I'm handling it. What are you going to do? Convince them you're not what they're looking for, he said, moving toward the door. And then make sure they never bother you again. Fiona caught his arm. Wade, be careful. These men, they burned your home. They could hurt you. Something warm flickered in his eyes. Worried about me, Miss Blackwood? Yes, she admitted simply. He covered her hand with his own for a brief moment. I'll be fine. I've faced worse than a few treasure hunters. Before she could respond, voices sounded from the front entrance. Wade moved swiftly to position himself near the parlor doorway, motioning for Fiona to stay where she was. The scarred man entered first, stopping short when he saw Wade. His hand instinctively moved toward his gun, but Wade's voice cut through the tension. I wouldn't, he said calmly. Not if you want what you came for. The scarred man's eyes narrowed. West, should have known you'd turn up like a bad penny. Likewise, Riker. Wade's posture remained relaxed, but Fiona could sense the coiled readiness beneath the surface. Burning a man's livelihood isn't the best way to start a negotiation. Wasn't my intention, Riker said without a hint of remorse. Things got out of hand. They often do when you're involved. Wade nodded toward the pouch at his belt. Looking for this. Riker's gaze fixed on the leather pouch. You found Morris. What's left of him fell from a cliff about 2 weeks back. Wade slowly untied the pouch from his belt. The relic was on his body. Hope and suspicion warred on Riker's face. Just like that, you're handing it over. For a price, Wade said. You and your men leave Whiteridge today, and you forget all about the red-haired woman Morris was raving about. At this, Riker's gaze shifted to Fiona, who had remained silent in her chair. That her, the curse? There is no curse, Wade said flatly. Morris was delirious with fear, made up stories to explain his own bad luck. The woman he described doesn't exist. Then who's she? Riker jerked his chin toward Fiona. Miss Blackwood works here at the boarding house, Wade said, and she's under my protection. Something in his tone made Riker pause. The two men behind him shifted uncomfortably. Your protection, Riker repeated slowly. I see. Do you? Wade's voice remained pleasant, but there was steel beneath it, because I'd hate for there to be any misunderstandings. Riker studied Wade's face, then Fiona's, then the pouch. Thorne pays well for what he wants. The relic alone might satisfy him, might not. It'll have to, Wade said, because the alternative is much less profitable for you. The threat hung in the air between them. Finally, Riker nodded. Show me the relic first. Need to be sure it's real. Wade opened the pouch and tipped the stone figure into his palm. Ask your Apache guides, they'll confirm it's authentic. Riker leaned closer to examine it, then stepped back. All right, West, you've got a deal. The relic for our immediate departure and amnesia regarding the lady. And the trading post, Wade added. Consider our business concluded on all fronts. Fair enough. Riker held out his hand for the pouch. Wade dropped the figure back inside and handed it over. The afternoon stage leaves in an hour. I suggest you be on it. Riker tucked the pouch into his coat. Always a pleasure, West. His gaze slid to Fiona one last time. Madam, with that, he and his men departed. Wade watched through the window until they had crossed the street, then turned back to Fiona, the tension visibly draining from his shoulders. They'll leave, he said with certainty. Riker's many things, but he's not foolish enough to cross me twice. You sound very sure of that, Fiona observed. A shadow crossed Wade's face. We have history. From the war, he knows what I'm capable of. The fire inside, Fiona murmured, remembering Joquin's words. Wade looked surprised. He told you that. He said you were a smoke walker. Someone who walks through fire and lives. Wade was quiet for a long moment. The war changed many of us, not always for the better. Is that why you came west? To escape the memories? Partly, he acknowledged. Mostly I came looking for peace, found it too for a while. A faint smile touched his lips, until a stagecoach broke down near my trading post and brought a supposedly cursed woman into my life. Fiona flushed. I've brought you nothing but trouble. I wouldn't say that. Wade moved closer, studying her face as if memorizing it. You also brought something I hadn't realized I was missing. What's that? Fiona asked, her heart suddenly racing. Purpose, he said simply. A reason to leave my self-imposed exile, a person worth protecting. The intensity in his gaze made it difficult to breathe. You barely know me, she whispered. I know enough, Wade replied. I know you faced unfair accusations all your life with dignity. I know you had the courage to start over alone in a strange town. I know you worried about me even when you had your own troubles. His voice softened. And I know that since the moment I saw you step down from that stagecoach, I haven't been able to get you out of my mind. Fiona stood, needing to move, to process the emotions swirling through her. What happens now? You go back to your trading post and I stay here. That depends, Wade said, watching her carefully. On what? On whether you might consider another option. He took a deep breath. Come with me, Fiona stared at him. To the trading post to start, Wade said. It's being rebuilt larger than before. Joaquin and I have plans to expand, make it a proper way station, maybe even the beginning of a new settlement. He stepped closer. It wouldn't be an easy life, certainly not as comfortable as what you have here. Why would you want me there? Fiona asked, hardly daring to hope she understood his meaning. Wade's smile was gentle. Because in the months I spent tracking Morris and his pursuers, thinking about you was what kept me going. Because I want to know you better, all of you, not just the woman I glimpsed for a few hours during a crisis. He hesitated, then added softly, because I think we might have something worth exploring, you and I. Your life seems dangerous, Fiona said, though her heart was already answering for her. Parts of it have been, Wade acknowledged. But the danger followed Morris and the relic, not you. That chapter's closed now. What if my family was right? Fiona asked, giving voice to her deepest fear. What if misfortune does follow me? Wade closed the distance between them and slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, took her hands in his. Then I guess I'm cursed too, he said, his eyes never leaving hers. And I can't think of a fate I'd welcome more. The conviction in his voice, the warmth of his touch, it all swept away the last of Fiona's doubts. Her entire life, she'd been blamed for events beyond her control, made to feel unwanted and dangerous to those around her. Yet here stood a man who knew all of that and wanted her anyway, not despite the supposed curse, but with a willingness to share whatever fate might bring them. When would we leave? She asked, her voice steady despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Wade's smile broadened, revealing that dimple she'd thought about for months. Is that a yes? It's a question, Fiona replied, though she couldn't suppress her answering smile. One of many I'll have before making such a decision. Of course, Wade said, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. I wouldn't expect anything less from a woman of your good sense. You still haven't answered. When would we leave? Not for a few weeks at least, Wade said. There are preparations to make, supplies to gather, and... He hesitated. There's the matter of propriety to consider. Fiona raised an eyebrow. Propriety? I wouldn't ask you to travel alone with me unless... Wade cleared his throat. Unless our relationship was formalized in some way, understanding dawned. Mr. West, are you proposing some sort of arrangement? I'm suggesting that we have time to come to know each other better, Wade said carefully. And if, after that time, you find my company as agreeable as I find yours, then yes, I would hope for a formal arrangement. One recognized by both law and custom. Marriage, Fiona stated plainly. Eventually, Wade confirmed, a touch of color rising to his tan cheeks. If you'll have me. Fiona studied his face, the earnest eyes, the strong lines softened now with vulnerability. This man had risked himself for her when she was a stranger. He had tracked dangerous men for months to ensure her safety. And now he offered her a future that, just days ago, she could never have imagined. I think, she said slowly, that getting to know you better would be a fine place to start. The relief and joy that transformed Wade's face made Fiona's heart swell. He lifted her hands and with old-fashioned courtesy pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Then we have a plan, Miss Blackwood. Fiona, she corrected softly, if we're to know each other better, you should use my name. Fiona, Wade repeated as if savoring the sound, and I'm Wade to you, always. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity and deepening emotion. True to his word, Wade remained in Whiteridge, taking a room at Margaret's boarding house and spending every available moment with Fiona. They shared meals, took walks through town, and spent long evenings in conversation on the front porch. Fiona learned that Wade had been a captain in the Union cavalry, had lost his entire family to illness before the war, and had come west seeking both escape and redemption. He learned about her childhood on the family homestead, her love of books, and the gradual way her family's superstitions had isolated her until she could no longer bear to stay. "I never believed I was cursed," she told him one evening as they watched the sunset from the boarding house porch. "But after hearing it for so many years, I started to wonder if there might be some truth to it. People fear what they don't understand," Wade said. "Your family needed explanations for life's hardships, and you were an easy target." "And you?" Fiona asked. "What do you fear, Wade West?" He was silent for a long moment. "Losing what matters," he finally said. "I've lost before family, friends, comrades. Each time it carves away a piece of you." "Yet you risked yourself for me," Fiona pointed out. "A stranger." Wade's smile was tinged with sadness. "Maybe that's how I fight the fear, by refusing to let it dictate my actions." Impulsively, Fiona reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "Thank you for that, for being brave enough to care." The look he gave her then, tender, vulnerable, hopeful, was worth all the years of isolation she had endured. As the days passed, their connection deepened. Wade received regular letters from Joaquin updating him on the trading post reconstruction. Fiona continued her work at the boarding house, but increasingly found herself imagining a different future, one with wide open spaces, new challenges, and Wade by her side. When the third week of Wade's stay came to a close, he invited Fiona to dinner at Whiteridge's finest restaurant. She wore her best dress, a deep green that complemented her red hair, and found Wade waiting for her in the boarding house parlor, looking uncommonly formal in a new suit. "You look beautiful," he said simply when he saw her. "As do you," Fiona replied with a smile. "Though I'm more accustomed to seeing you in trail dust." Wade offered his arm. "Thought the occasion warranted some effort." The restaurant was intimate and elegant by frontier standards, with tablecloths and actual wine glasses, luxuries Fiona had almost forgotten existed. Over a meal of roast beef and potatoes, they talked easily about everything and nothing, comfortable now in each other's company. When dessert arrived, apple pie with fresh cream, Wade grew suddenly serious. "I received a letter from Joaquin today," he said. "The trading post is nearly complete. Larger than before, with proper guest rooms and a dining area." "That's wonderful," Fiona said, though her stomach tightened at what she knew must come next. "It's time for me to return," Wade confirmed, watching her face carefully. "There's a supply wagon leaving for Cottonwood Creek tomorrow." Fiona set down her fork. "I see, do you?" Wade reached across the table to take her hand. "Because what I'm really saying, Fiona Blackwood, is that I love you. These weeks with you have been the happiest of my life, and I don't want them to end." Her heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. "Wade, I know it's fast," he continued. "I know you might need more time, but I also know what I feel, and I've learned not to waste time when something matters." From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. This was my mother's. "I've carried it with me since I left home, never thinking I'd have cause to use it. Until now." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band set with a small pearl. "Fiona Blackwood, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not because it's proper or convenient, but because I love you and want to build a life with you, whatever fortune may bring." Tears blurred Fiona's vision. For so long, she had been defined by what others feared about her. Now, this man offered her a future defined by love instead. "Your family called you a curse," Wade said softly when she didn't immediately respond. "But from the moment I met you, all I've found is blessing. Say you'll marry me, Fiona. Say you'll come home with me." "Yes," Fiona whispered, her voice catching. "Yes to both." Wade's face transformed with joy. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then raised her hand to his lips. "Then I guess I'm cursed too," he said, his eyes shining with love and promise, "and I couldn't be happier about it." 3 days later, they were married in Whiteridge's small church, with Margaret as their witness and the local minister officiating. Fiona wore a new dress of pale blue with wildflowers in her hair. Wade looked at her as though she were the miracle he'd never expected to find. The journey to Cottonwood Creek took 4 days by wagon. As they crested the final ridge, Fiona gasped at the sight below. Where there had once been a simple trading post, a small settlement was taking shape. The main building had been rebuilt larger than before, with a proper second story and a wide front porch. Several smaller structures surrounded it, and in the distance, Fiona could see the beginnings of corrals and what might become a stable. "Welcome home," Wade said, his arm around her waist. Joaquin met them at the edge of the clearing, his normally stoic expression softening at the sight of them together. He clasped Wade's hand, then surprised Fiona by taking hers as well. "Good," he said simply. "Now the fire inside is quiet." That evening, as she and Wade stood on the porch of their new home watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Fiona felt a peace she had never known before. The supposed curse that had shadowed her life had led her here to this place, to this man, to this moment of perfect belonging. "Any regrets?" Wade asked, his arms encircling her from behind. Fiona leaned back against his chest, secure in his embrace. "Not a single one. Even though you've tied yourself to a man who lives on the edge of nowhere, especially because of that," Fiona said, turning in his arms to face him. "Out here we can define ourselves, not by what others fear or expect, but by what we choose to build together." Wade's kiss was tender, a promise of all the days to come. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "Then I guess we're both cursed," he murmured. "Cursed with the best kind of luck, the kind we make ourselves." And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Fiona Blackwood West knew with absolute certainty that no curse could touch them now. Whatever challenges life might bring, they would face them together not as bearers of misfortune, but as creators of their own destiny. In the years that followed, Cottonwood Creek grew from a trading post to a thriving settlement. Wade and Fiona built a life rich with purpose and love, eventually welcoming 2 children who grew up knowing nothing of curses, only the blessing of being wanted and cherished. And if occasionally, when storms gathered on the horizon or unexpected setbacks occurred, someone remembered the old stories about Fiona bringing bad luck, Wade would simply smile and say, "Then I guess I'm cursed too." And somehow, in the sharing, what might have been misfortune became simply another chapter in their story, a story of 2 people who found each other against all odds and created their own kind of luck in the wild heart of the West.